the whole intention of today is to start the online course, but I'm doing it live stream. So every week there'll be another course, and this will help me with my material and get the full course going. But there will be quite a lot of repetition of stuff I've done, and this is what I found, is that there's a lot of material that you kind of reuse. So all the slideshows are online. Forestgarden.wales, and this is the link. Oh, let me put the link in. forestgarden.wales/course/index/index.html. That will be in the chat. I'll put that in the links. So that's a link of all the slideshows that I'll be using, and I'm kind of updating them as I'm going along as well. So I'll re-record all of this stuff for the actual course itself, and then I will I'll record these sessions and put them on YouTube. So you will always have access to the slideshow, and you will always have access to these videos on my YouTube channel. Now, search for Forest Garden Wales on YouTube. Do subscribe. Oh, I should have a subscribe link. Hold on a second. I've got a subscribe link. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel, just because that means I get to have a name. If I get 100 subscribers, I get a proper name rather than UCKXK or something. So yeah, that's right. So yeah, if you have got a Google account, do subscribe. It's not essential. It just makes it a bit easier to promote my stuff. So that's the plan. Now, as regards the free, the idea is for the full online course. Thank you. The full online course will be sold via Udemy at udemy.com, and I'm not sure of the price because I don't know what their pricing structure is off the top of my head. It will be around 20, 30, 40 pounds. I'm not sure there's a minimum price, so I've got to figure it out basically. And if you ever do look at Udemy, they have a lot of courses where you can get a free, you can get a cut price course. So there's some good stuff. When I was doing my web design work, I did quite a few courses on there, and there's some really, really good kind of quality courses on there. So do have a look around, but do wait for either get a coupon, or they discount the courses all the time. So never pay full whack for a course. If you wait around, you'll be able to get a discount, and I'll have discount codes, I'm sure. Okay, so Udemy will be where the full course is, and then Udemy will also be where the free mini course is. The free mini course is it's basically the planning section, the planning slideshow, and I've kind of compressed it and put it into one free mini course. It's all about planning with a bit of design as well. And what I will find is, or what I am finding is, that it's tying the different parts of the course together. So it's not just one. There's not just like you need to kind of do the whole course, but everything links back to the beginning. So like the planning, you need to know about the plants, obviously, and the planning relates to the design, but the design relates to the plants and the trees and the shrubs and the ground cover and the ground preparation. They're all interconnected. So the trick is going to be to how to tie them and get a coherent story. So that's the overall plan. So now, without further ado, I will answer questions later on. As I said, anything that's not working, I'll do let me know. So if there's any kind of any issues with sound, give us a shout. Let me see if I can pop that down here. Okay, now, oh dear. Oh, well, I need to do this. So the backyard forest. Let's get cracking. If you want the notes, press the P key on the slideshow, and you'll get notes. I'm actually a bit behind on my notes for each slide, but you can see. This is where I'll put further links and further information. So press P to get rid of them, P to get the notes. Okay. Here we go. Welcome to Forest Garden Wales. My name is Jake Rayson. I am a forest gardener and a forest garden designer, which I'm sure you knew already. But if you didn't, that's what I do. So this is a course. This is a preview of the course, The Backyard Forest, Creating a Backyard Forest. And this is a preview which I'm doing free, live streaming and saving onto YouTube. The reason for calling it the backyard forest is because most people don't know what a forest garden is, and I really want to appeal to people with smaller gardens so that they feel that they can have a forest garden as well, because most people do not have acres of land. So this is a photograph on the cover. This is a photograph from Dr. Carol Kirk, who has a small forest garden, and she very kindly let me use it for this course. And you can get an idea just from that it's an edible ornamental garden, and it's a relatively small space, but it exhibits all the characteristics of a forest garden. So the backyard forest is a forest garden for a small space, essentially. Okay. There's the URL. Right, let's get going. So this is me. This is my website, forestgarden.wales, and my email is hello@forestgarden.wales. I'm on Twitter, forestgdnwales, Facebook at forestgardenwales, and then you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, and the channel is has all the recordings of live stream and little snippets as well. So all the stuff that I do on Twitch, like today, will all be on my YouTube channel. So let's get cracking. Forest gardening is actually it's actually quite a big subject. So creating a backyard forest, even in a small space, there is an awful lot to kind of cram into a course. But you don't. The good thing is you don't have to know everything to begin. The best thing to do is to start. This is a photograph of Martin Crawford's forest garden down in Devon, and this is a film made by Thomas Reino. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It's the National Geographic short film. He won an award for it about Martin Crawford's garden. So this is like a big forest garden. But the kind of key question is really, where do you begin with a forest garden? So I've kind of broken this down for the purposes of the course. I've tried to simplify it as much as possible, and I'm breaking it down into 8 different sections and kind of walking you through each different section. Now, what I've also done, which is very exciting, I've asked a friend of a friend who lives in Cardiff, has very kindly said I can use his garden as an experiment. He has a relatively small terraced house with a relatively small back garden, southeast facing. And what I will be doing is to walk through each stage. I'll have a slideshow and me talking, but I'll also have some additional material where I'm demonstrating what I'm talking about and then using it as a design. I am doing this remotely with him, so I'm not actually going to be doing any hands-on gardening there, but the whole kind of design and planning considerations, all that will be there, which is good. So the best place to really begin is with looking at what you've got, but I'll come on to that in a second. So what you'll learn today, I'm going to do a quick course overview and go through each of the different sections and why I've created the different sections. Then we look at a definition of a backyard forest, like a small forest garden, and then I'm going to look at the characteristics of a forest garden, and then there's the top tip guidelines, the things to always bear in mind when you're creating a forest garden. So those are the 4 things that we're going to get through today. So first of all, this is a peacock, by the way, butterfly on a Jupiter's beard, red valerian, Centranthus ruber, I think. So yeah, it's a forest garden plant, and it's a bit of wildlife, and that's just outside. Lovely. So the course overview. First off, introducing, it's what I'm doing now, introducing the backyard forest online course. Secondly, it's the planning stage, and this is looking at how to get the observations for your particular site and different tools available to you, and what observations to make and how to actually do a survey and gather the information. But also the other part of that as well is to figure out what it is that you want and what you're aiming for, and to get some kind of clarity for your particular vision and what you particularly want. And then we're going to look at the design process. This is a screenshot of a CAD package, but the design process can be on paper as well. You don't have to have any fancy software for the design process. It's much more a thought process than it is whether you do it on a computer or on a piece of paper. And we'll look at how to move the items around in a forest garden, how to move the different elements around in a forest garden, put things in the right place. And that's that process. And then after that, we will get on to discussing actual plants and the different functions of different plants. So that's the remaining parts of the course. And the remaining 5 parts are all about the plants and getting your hands dirty. So first up would be protection. I'm just going to check my chat. That's all cool. So first up is protection. Originally I'll call this windbreaks, but because again for the backyard forest, I think protection is more, people will think about protection in terms of it's less about the wind and it's far more about protecting individual plants because it's this kind of smaller space. So that's all about windbreaks and why you have windbreaks and the advantages of them and different plants that you can use for windbreaks and for protecting plants and other structures as well. And then we'll look at number 5. We'll be looking at perennial vegetables, different perennial veg, my favourites, and what I'm actually kind of shifting towards with a forest garden, and I think I will find this increasingly with designing for a small forest garden, is it actually makes sense to design to focus on different parts of the garden for having different functions. So perennial vegetables, like herbaceous kind of perennial veg, I think are more of a kind of separate part with easier access, whereas the kind of fruit shrubs, for example, black currants and raspberries and etc., they will be kind of more in a different area. So I'm actually playing with this myself with my own forest garden. I have found it helps concentrate the mind to have a specific area for specific types of plants. So it's not about the plants, it's more about how people use gardens. So I'll be going through perennial vegetables, number 5. Lecture number 5. Lecture number 6, the canopy layer, the big trees, and in a small forest garden that will be the smaller trees as well, but this is the highest level in the garden. And then on to ground preparation, how to prepare the ground before planting. And the reason I've done it in this, there is a reason for doing it in this particular order as well, because the key thing is to get the protection in first, and is to create a micro climate for your plants to thrive. And then it's good to get going with the perennial vegetables, because you'll get a yield, you'll get a harvest from it quickly, and then the trees can go in, and it's like you can do each stage and you don't have to rush on to the next stage. So the ground preparation is before you get into the next part, which is to plant the shrubs and the ground cover. And I kind of put these together. Yeah, I'll see how it goes. These might change a little bit, but I'll put these together because there's a lot of overlap between the kind of propagation and the where they're at in the stage. So what I'm saying is, you can have the trees, and you can have the trees amongst existing plants, or you can have the trees in a lawn, so long as the tree is mulched. And then when you're ready, you can do the ground preparation and put in the shrubs and the ground cover. Okay. So that's the course overview. Excuse me. On to a definition. I do find it so interesting. Time and time again, I come back to kind of defining a backyard forest and a forest garden. I'll use the terms interchangeably, by the way. So backyard forest, forest garden. And I think it's illuminating, because it really questions the work that you're doing and the garden that you want. And more and more and more, I come to realize that the heart of this is the idea. Well, it's Martin Crawford. Oh, crikey, I forgot to mention that as well. Martin Crawford, in his must-buy book. I mean, he's a very inspirational character. Let me see if I can get this. Am I on camera? Yeah, here we go. So Martin Crawford, very inspirational character, very inspirational person. Written an awful lot about forest gardens and trees and nut trees, and so he's got a wealth of information. Fantastic nursery as well. Anyway, in his seminal book, Creating a Forest Garden, which I totally recommend because it covers the process of creating a forest garden, and it also covers all the plants as well. So it's a brilliant reference too. So it's great. I use it all the time still. A lot of information in there, but it's working with nature to grow edible crops, and I think that is absolutely critical. The whole idea that you're working with nature, and this feeds in. Yeah, so this kind of feeds into the approach that you're letting nature do the heavy lifting. That you're letting, excuse me, that the hard work is being done by natural processes, not by human intervention. Now, it is a managed space, it is a garden, but you're letting nature do the heavy lifting. So, and you're doing this by emulating the woodland edge. Now, actually, that's a bloody good point. Actually, I'll keep notes as I go along. And by that, emulate woodland edge. The land nature wants to settle at a natural point, and in a cool temperate climate, in the majority of places, that is woodland. I mean, obviously there's variations, and this is what plants work towards. And if you hold back, like an annual vegetable garden is bare with no perennial vegetables whatsoever, so you've got access to annual vegetables. But if that's a lot of work to maintain it at that point, and believe me, I spent last summer working on a market garden, and it is an awful lot of work. Whereas if you have a garden that is on the kind of cusp of a woodland edge, it's on the cusp of a woodland, then it's a lot easier to maintain because there's less weeding because you have a perennial ground cover, and there's less to add fertility because there's nutrients in the actual garden itself. So it's far more of a complete ecosystem. And yeah, I think this is the kind of critical point. It's working, that whole idea of a forest garden emulating the woodland edge. It kind of nails it. It's this idea of it's less work because you're working with nature. You're putting your garden in the situation which is more natural, so there is less work for you to do. And you do that using perennial plants that grow for more than a couple of years, and ground cover plants that you use to essentially cover the ground. And another way of looking at that is to say you're growing edible crops in a wildlife garden. You have an edible ecosystem, and this has been the big revelation for me over the past couple of years. Really, this is really what a forest garden is. It's a wildlife garden. It's having your cake and eat it. So this is for me the kind of key takeaway. It's sustainable. It's it's a sustainable garden, and because it's working with nature, you can keep on doing it. And a question then about why a backyard forest, and I shall expand this section. I think these are the climate warming stripes. Sorry, why backyard forest? So I'm just going to make notes as I go along. Illustration. For me, I think there's an awful lot going on in the world at the moment, and I think there's a kind of dawning realization that things, as they're set up at the moment, aren't working, and this goes across the board. This is a human problem. as somebody said about Black Lives Matter, racism is a white problem, and I think this is ecological and climate emergency is a human problem, and they are kind of interconnected. I won't go into the kind of politics now, but I've starting to see the connections between a policy of supremacy of colonialism and the climate and ecological emergencies. So yeah, I'll have a think about this, and I'll expand it later on. And I don't want to get political now, but I do think there's an awful lot of linkages about attitudes and how people live, and a lot of this kind of has to change. And in a small way, but a very significant way, a backyard forest and a forest garden are ways to address this, are ways to look at it and to reevaluate it. And what we're doing with a forest garden is to look at our relationship to how we produce our food and our relationship to nature. And so these for me are the kind of two driving reasons: the ecological emergency and climate emergency. So it then feeds in to other activities as well. There's a chap called Ron Finley who is the gangster gardener in LA, and really interesting, really inspirational, because it goes beyond. It's about the people. It's about the food, but it's about the people and how he gardens and what he's about. And I think it's the same with the forest gardening. It's actually a political with a small p act, and it's activism. It's actually doing something, and it's good for you, and it's fun, and etc. So I'll expand that. I'll expand that later on. Without getting too political on your asses. Okay, so characteristics of a forest garden. There's 5. Yeah, there's more. It's all kind of interrelated. But there are 5 ways of telling if you have a forest garden. Where you get to a forest garden. So firstly, it's sustainable. As I mentioned before, this is really, really kind of critical. This is at the core of forest gardening. Is it sustainable? And forest gardening, so is the whole point being that all the fertility of the garden is provided by the garden itself. It's all the everything is provided by the garden. So like the fertility and the pest control are provided by the garden. The humans aren't importing anything onto the site. So you can keep on doing it. So it's like you set it up. Once you've set it up, then it just can keep, you can keep it ticking over. There's no need to buy bags of compost. There's no need to do loads of watering. There's no need to spray pesticides on. There's no need to use herbicides on weeds. So it keeps itself going. Yeah, that's the kind of beauty, with a little helping hand to kind of keep it in balance. So yeah, and as part of that, I do want to mention native plants, because I think there's always room in a forest garden for native plants. Just take an example. This is a photograph here of the bee. That's changed its name. It was a sedum, hypotelethonium. It's a sedum. It's an orpine ice plant, which is a native sedum to the UK. And it's a fantastic bee plant, and you can eat the leaves. There are actually other sedums as well, I think, which are more palatable. But it's a case in point. You can have a wildlife native plant that fits in a forest garden, and there is always room for native plants. I'm going to do a separate slide on this actually, but I'll figure that out. Let me just add a note, native plants. And the whole reason for having native plants is they've co-evolved with the wildlife. So not only are they providing pollen and nectar, they are also providing a food source for the different life cycles of the variety of different insects in the garden. And the more insects you have in your garden, then the more wildlife you have. The more balanced it is, because then you bring in the birds and then you bring in the larger mammals, and you want to create a balance so everything is kind of balancing out. And the idea is native plants have co-evolved with your native wildlife. So add native plants, right? And a side, oh yeah, there's, yeah. So a side advantage of this, a side effect of this, is that it's low. A forest garden is low maintenance, and with a backyard forest, you can just imagine it's kind of such a relatively small space. It's great. You can quite literally keep on top of it. There's minimal weeding. Because you have permanent living ground cover. There's no watering once all the plants are established. You're not applying any fertilizers. You're not making any comfrey tea, because you're just doing really kind of simple chop and drop, as shown in here, where you chop comfrey leaves and drop them around the base of fruit trees. So there's no digging, because you're not really. I mean, occasionally you'll be digging up roots, tubers, like American pignut, I think it's called, Apios americana. So it's really low maintenance, and this is a kind of, it's another reason to do it, because people don't have that much time, and you want to be doing other things as well. But it's a massive selling point, and it's productive. Now, this is an interesting one actually. I thought this was it's a Cornus, and I thought it was Cornus. I thought it was Cornus Cusa, but it's actually, I think from the size of the fruits, it's a Cornus capitata. I haven't got the book here, but Anyway, there's the forest garden. The kind of defining characteristic of a forest garden is that it's productive, that you're getting something from it, and this is lovely because it's such a broad definition. You're getting food, and you're getting, bamboo canes, and you're getting string from New Zealand flax, and you're getting herbs, and you can have medicinal plants and dye plants and firewood and all sorts of things. But you're also getting a lot of enjoyment from it, and I think this is what really is kind of lacking. Is this? There's a kind of, you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it. You can have a beautiful garden, and you can eat it as well, and it's providing a home for wildlife. So it really is like it's a win for everybody. There's a very interesting gardener. I'll write his name down. I'll put this in the chat actually. Oops. There's a really good gardener. Totally recommend him. John Little and his Green Roof Company. I'll put it in the and he has, Green Roof Company, and I'll put ornamental. He does a lot of great work with waste materials for everything from crushed concrete through to leftover sand from road building to all sorts of stuff, all sorts of different materials. And he does really, really geometric gardens. I mean, do check out his work. It's just like it's so kind of interesting, and it's the same for a forest garden. There is this sense. I mean, I do feel that there is a real danger of it being, not ghettoized is the wrong word, but kind of fenced off, and it's like it's a wild garden, and this is the way that it looks, and it can't be ornamental. But actually, no, you can, so long as you're kind of following the principles, you can make it as ornamental and as geometric as you like. So that's why I think John Little, I must get some slides actually, and I'll put them in here too. That's why I think John Little is so interesting, because he has really kind of geometric shapes. He has kind of circles of crushed concrete, and then grows plants, native plants that cope with growing crushed concrete. And he'll use it, and he'll have circular paths. It's kind of really interesting, really exciting. So there, it's productive, but it's productive in all sorts of different ways. It's productive as an ornamental garden. So I'll add that to my notes. Productive, and of course it's wildlife friendly. This is absolutely this is kind of essential. It's you're encouraging predators. You're encouraging toads and frogs. You've got a wildlife pond. You want hoverflies that eat aphids, and hoverflies that pollinate and solitary bees and set up bee hotels for them and log piles for toads, and it's all kind of interconnected. So you're creating a wildlife garden, and that is absolutely central to a forest garden. And then layers, and 7 different layers of the I won't go through them. 3 layers in my mind. So you've got trees, shrubs, ground cover, and everything in between. But you're using all the available space, and that's just like really, it's kind of really efficient in a lazy sort of way. I must write that down as well, because this garden, cool. And finally, perennial. You're mostly using perennial plants. This is a photograph of a oh goodness me, what's it called? Not an artichoke, the other one. It's closely related to an artichoke. Oh, you eat the stems. Brain's gone blank. But yes, you're using perennials. I do know what it is. I actually do know what it is, but I just the name escapes me. So you're using perennials in a forest garden mostly, but you're also using annuals as well. So it's not just you're using annuals that are easy. They self-seed. So, or I don't know, poached eggplant is an example. You've got a short-lived perennial like columbine. Oh blimey, better get move on. Right then, so there we go. Okay. I'll come to the questions very quickly. I've got 10 minutes to get onto that one. So I've got to race through the rest of this. So you've had the different characteristics of the forest garden, and here are kind of 4 guidelines. And no matter the size of your forest garden, whether you've got a backyard forest or whether you've got acres and acres, these are the things that I always kind of come back to bear in mind throughout the whole kind of process. Firstly is the protection. So you want to have you want to protect from the wind. Ideally, you want to have a big, thick hedge, great for wildlife. It can be productive, and it provides shelter for the garden. Whilst the windbreak is getting established, you can use nurse trees. If you have a larger kind of garden, you can have a nurse tree, and I'm going to revisit this as well. Protection. A nurse tree is just a small. It's a shrub that you plant in front of a particular tree as it's growing, and then you kind of you get rid of it after a few years. So the example here is broom, Scotch broom, which is nitrogen fixing member of the pea family, and it's a really good kind of nurse tree. So you're protecting a tree, particularly in exposed positions. And then there's also a hedge, dead hedge, which is a pile of sticks in between some other sticks, and this is really simple to set up. And again, I must get that. John Little, he had a photograph of an absolutely beautiful dead hedge, which is more like a Andy Galsworthy, the artist who works with natural elements. So protection, absolutely kind of critical thing to think about, whatever the size of the garden. Next up is spacing. Always plan and design and plant to the final size. So work out, and this is for big shrubs and for trees, you always put a tree or a big shrub in to the final size. Other plants you can move around more easily, whereas trees and big shrubs are a lot of work to move once they get established. So this means knowing your rootstock. If you're planting if you're planting a fruit tree, then you need to know what the rootstock is, because the rootstock will determine the height, the vigor, and the diameter of the tree. And you need to leave enough space in between the trees. So that space is a quarter to half of the average canopy diameter. So you've got 2 4-meter diameter trees. It's between 1 and 2 meters space between them. And this is a kind of principle that runs across small trees and large shrubs as well. So do get the spacing right. Get the right plant in the right place that will fill the space. And like same for windbreaks, don't put something in that you're going to have to keep cutting every year. Put something in that will grow to the right size, so there's less maintenance involved. Next up is ground cover. always, always, always have ground cover. So whether you're using plants or whether you're using, your aim is to use plants, but then you can use bark or wood chip in the meantime whilst your ground cover plants get established, which I'll cover in ground cover plants. And finally, nutrients. Make a nutrient budget and stick to it. Just make sure that you've got enough nutrients in the garden. That's nitrogen fixers such as members of the pea family and things like Elaeagnus, alder. There are some kind of smaller alders that you can get as well. Green alder is one of them. But yeah, nitrogen and then potassium as well. In this case, there's not the small white Jack Russell, but the comfrey in the foreground. That's a potassium fixer. So add notes. Cool. So there we go. Now I hope that's useful. The things I wanted you to take away really are the whole idea of growing edible crops with nature, and then it's the fact that it's sustainable. It's all about being sustainable. It's setting up a garden so that it essentially looks after itself as much as possible. Your work, once your backyard forest or forest garden is established, your work is a bit of weeding and harvesting and the odd bit of pruning, and that's it. And take your time. I mean, I've been gardening. We've been here for 5 years now in West Wales, and a bit more of a bio. Yeah. And it's a work in progress. The garden is never forest garden. A garden is never finished. So take your time. Don't rush into things. Much better to concentrate on a small part near the house, and bit by bit, just keep on going and add to it, and then do another bit and do another bit. And it takes time. There's no need to get everything done within 24 hours. It's life is not a TV show. There we go. And so, yes, I'll just take some couple of quick questions if there are any. This is me. I'll put an appendix in as well, which I'll probably add to the notes. But there's links on the slideshow to various books and decent websites as well. And this is my email address and the newsletter where you can sign up and get notified of courses and live streams and things like that. And the music is by an old friend of mine, Matthew from I Am the Mighty Jungulator. Okay, there we go. I hope that's useful.